Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Welcome to another great episode here at IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Cherokee Boos. If you've been following along and studying with our CompTIA Project Plus shows, you know that we just looked at how to execute and design our project schedule. Now we need to go ahead and take a further look at that. So we know that we're ready to go ahead and make our project schedule. We know how we want to design our work breakdown structure. But how do we go ahead and start, Ronnie? Where do we need to start and what do we need to make it work?
Well, when we start to take a look then at the idea here in CompTIA's Project Plus about making sure we can design a schedule, right? The great thing is, if I can actually get words out of my mouth, if I have my work breakdown structure already created, now I need to get into the true arena of scheduling. Now, there are people out there that are masters at scheduling things that need to be done. You know, for me, it's as simple as looking at a calendar and saying, I have an appointment that day. And that is at the heart and basis of normally things that we need to do and get accomplished. But when it comes down to a project here, okay, we not only have to be able to talk about the idea of scheduling in terms of time, okay, as far as a date goes, okay, but we need to also be able to track things like duration as well, and then work hours too. So now all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more challenging in that task and that duty, especially if I'm doing it using, let's say, just a regular calendar of some sort. Even with those big desk calendars that you have, not saying it can't be done. People have done project management that way for years and years and years. But now today we have what we call PMIS types of software, and that means project management integration software is what we have, and that means that what they do is they take multiple components together and pull them into one piece of software that will help to do everything that I was talking about and be able to manage it all from one location instead. And there's many pieces of software that's out there like that, and it depends on the size and scope of your project and how much money you're actually willing to spend on this stuff to decide which one you're going to use.
Especially for industries that utilize SCADA systems, if they have any kind of valve systems, any kind of remote telemetry that's going on there. So it just kind of integrates all together.
It really does. It helps because those, you know, certain types of software, of course, are designed for certain industries, but there's actually general and very generic types of project management software that's out there as well. And you can find them ranging from free products all the way to, well, fairly expensive products. I'm going to choose the one to make a demonstration, the one that I am most familiar with, which is Microsoft's project instead. And it's because that's the one that I've really used over time in terms of project management, and it's the one that I feel like that's really going to give you still the same activities that you'll normally see and the same feel of things that you have to accomplish when you start setting up a schedule. But we're going to show you that Microsoft also, and this is not a Microsoft show of course, but where they've actually taken a little bit of time and initiative to make it easier for a project manager to manage their project, okay, by using Microsoft Project, which is their product. And the way that it actually begins to work is fairly neat, at least for me. That's what I have thought in the past. So let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to bring up Microsoft Project on my computer. And so there it is. I'm going to launch it, and it's actually simply going to come up, and it's going to ask me what it is I want to do. And let me just go ahead and pick one. I'm just going to pick.
Now, Ronnie, I noticed from this menu here, it looks like we can go ahead and integrate a lot of different things such as Excel spreadsheets. One thing that I really love that's also a Microsoft product would be Microsoft Visio. So are we able to go ahead and really, it looks like they have some good integration set up here.
Well, they do. They allow you to pull information from a lot of different sources here. Excel is actually an easy one because a lot of people do use Excel for their project management instead. Here they're trying to show you that at least at the beginning, you know, that you do have some options. Right here they have several templates is what they also have where we can do that. And I'm trying to find, let's use a simple project plan, and we'll create one right here too, okay? Now, when we talk about simplistic, they've just went ahead and made the most generic project that they possibly can. And we're going to get rid of some of the, not extraneous, but a little bit of the fancy features so that we can set up and see what we need to do. All right, so when it comes down to the very beginning, okay, of what starts to happen, once you have your work breakdown structure, you can now start to use this portion over here as an Excel spreadsheet if you want to, okay? But it allows us to go ahead and make entries such as our task. Now, summary task 1 and 2 and 3, normally this would kind of be our second level or our top level breakdown of our WBS that we might enter in there. And then these other tasks that are indented in between normally become our subtasks, okay? In other words, that smaller WBS package, work package that we have. Notice the duration is also shown here and the start and finish date to those. And this actually does have it rolled up where summary task number 1, even though it starts on Friday the 21st and ends on Thursday the 27th. I was trying to make sure that we zoom in so that we can see that. We really didn't have to actually know all those dates. Okay? All we needed to know was actually to be able to set the very beginning here of what we call our baselines to help us out. Now, when we look at a little bit at another episode where we talked about cost baselines, right, where it shows how much money we expend over the period of our project, we showed you a chart that helps us out to do that. And that's set up for comparison so that as we start having actual costs, we can compare it to the baseline. Well, when you first start with Microsoft Project here, let me do this other thing. I'm just going to open up a blank project and show you what happens at the very beginning. Okay? The first thing that you have to do is really almost set up a baseline as well. You click on information over here, and the first bit of information that you want is what your project is going to be named. So here, I'm just going to call it Project 001. Okay? I know, a great long, very creative name, but it's not really that creative. And then it actually asks me for 2 things, okay? And it actually only needs one of these 2 things, okay? So it's saying, hey, what date would you like to start on, okay? So in other words, once I set this date, so let's say that I want to start this on, we'll do the, I know it's kind of weird, but October 31st is actually kind of the same week as November begins. So let's start on a Monday, October 31st here, as you know, of this particular recording. And notice that I could go ahead and put in a finish date at this point too. Now I'm not going to go ahead and put in a finish date right now, and then I'm going to click OK. And once I do, okay, you can see where it starts filling in information for me. It went ahead and say, hey, here's the date you're going to start. Now, if I start to, let me see if I can zoom out a little bit here. So I can add in, let's say this is going to be subtask, or let's just call it task. Task number 1, at this point, this can also be a particular task that I add in. And now, when you start to actually add in stuff, it will also help you by rolling these tasks up. And so I want to just show you at least the beginning here and show you what's happening, okay? So notice that this top one right here is actually bolded. And so when they added in task number 1, and they said that was 2 days, that was fine. So if I know that task number 1 was supposed to take me 3 days, well, all I have to do is come in here and type in 3 days. And now notice it changes the summary, okay? Then task number 2, let's say that's supposed to take me 5 days. That changes, and all these places that are actually marked in these blue here start to change. And that all started when I did have just a project start date. We didn't have to enter in any of these additional dates here. The software was able to calculate that out. And as I start adding in tasks and estimates in there, it will start to calculate out start and finish dates for everything that I have. And then at this point, I also would need to add in some resources. So I can add in some additional resources over here by clicking on this drop down. And if there's resources that are listed, they would show up here. But if they're not here, it means I would need to go to a different sheet, which is called resources, and then select assign resources. And I don't have any resource names here. So I would actually need to create resources and then assign them in there. And then that would start to change as well based on their work day as well. So it really does help to actually have the resource assignments and to allocate those resources that are available. And once you have that set up before any work is done during your planning, then there's a way inside a Microsoft project that what you can do is then take a snapshot of this entire project and set it as a baseline, okay? So here, let's say that this is the baseline. I click set, And now I create a baseline, and then once my project starts being used, I can now create a report based on the baseline versus also what the actual stuff is going to be as I update all of these durations, and the time elements that are also involved inside of what we tend to see. Okay? So there's a lot of information that we can take a look at when we start to do this. Okay? Now the other thing that we also have to determine is what is going to be how we count the duration itself. Okay? Microsoft Project by default uses the terms days, but you can change this if you needed to let's say 4 hours. So if I wanted to, I could do 4 hours. All right, so I can actually change not only to hours, but I can also change it to minutes if I wanted to. If I can ever stop double clicking on anything. 15 minutes. And notice that I can track all the way down to minutes, hours, days, and even at some point here, I want to come down here so that we can even see months. So I could actually do 6 months. Notice that I can do that, and even years. So that would be silly on this one because it doesn't make any sense. Oh, let's see. Why? Is that all I have to do? Oh, it doesn't like that on that particular duration. So I was hoping I could, but it apparently does not want me to do that. So it actually allows me to do at least minutes, hours, and days, and probably even weeks if we wanted to. Let's see if 6 weeks will work. Nope. So it allows that, but at one point it actually allowed you to do years if you wanted to, and months and weeks. So now it actually has a breakdown. So if you say, I don't really need a whole day, you can actually make it smaller. Need just a couple of hours, you can do that. And you need minutes, you can even break down to that particular assignment as well. So this is actually where it becomes very important that you have as much as you can of estimating those durations to as close as possible to be able to help you to figure those things out too. Okay? Now the other thing that we can also do is once we can do something like this, right? Notice that I don't now have to actually track the resource. All the resource information would be entered into Microsoft Project. I can now track the duration of a particular task. I can track when a task actually starts and is supposed to finish as well. We can do all of that information from one piece of software. If not, I would need at least an Excel spreadsheet. I would need some calendaring system. So I could use something like Microsoft Outlook if I wanted to. I would need a task list of some sort to ensure that I actually put everything down at the same time. I would also need to be able to work with scheduling coordinators to do everything that I needed to verify that resources weren't overallocated. There's a ton of different things that right here in a single application that helps us to determine that as well. So here it actually does help us to determine the overall duration of things as we start to see things here. So we'll actually end up, let me see if I can scroll up to the top on this particular one. Oh, it actually does just begin that summary task. There's a lot of times where you can create a project task that will essentially roll up everything and show you like the overall duration of the entire project. This one's not created inside of the template itself. Okay? Now, once you have those things set up and no work has actually begun, this is where you begin adding in what we call milestones into your project. Now, we've talked about this in a previous episode where we were able to essentially take anything, okay, and say here's where we make a go and no-go decision, okay, whether the project's going to proceed or whether it's not going to proceed from this point. And the nice thing is they actually even have one right here for us as a demonstration. So on task number 4, notice that this one has 0 duration. Microsoft Project automatically sets this, and you can see where the difference in the color is, which is going to be, well, a black diamond. And that is actually a project task that has no duration. And the way that this is describing it is that this is a summary of the number 1 task that's actually to be completed here. Okay? So that's what we tend to have when we start to see that. And that milestone, again, gives us that little break. It doesn't actually cost any time. It actually says, here's what it's going to take for us to go ahead and make sure that we have a place that we can mark in our project here to say what the milestone is going to be. And you can set that up throughout your entire project schedule as you choose to do something like this as well. Okay? So there's a lot of information that we can jam into one product, and the neat thing is it can keep track of it all and it can adjust it for us so that when we start to take a look at how long something is actually going to take or when we should finish a particular task by. I have it by every single task, and then at the very end, at this point, I notice that my latest date is actually going to be Monday, the November 14th of 2016, down here, which is my final date so far. But as I add in more information, all that will actually readjust, and as I change more information, that's what will also happen. And actually, I'm even lying to you. There's 126 days and then for 6 months, so actually April 17th instead.
And this is
what we're
pretty
seeing.
awesome. If you had something like Office 365 set up, you could go ahead and make changes to your documents, and pretty much in real time, other employees would be able to access your changes and the shared information that you have throughout your organization there.
Yeah, there's just so much more, and this is where I would recommend that if you're going, hey, I've never seen that product before, can I learn more about it? You can. You can go to IT Pro TV Library, and there's actually a whole show on a Microsoft project, at least to get you through that introductory level and understanding how you can manage it more effectively. Here, we're not trying to teach you the product, and that's why I'm just kind of hit the highlights overall, but just kind of realize that you can use something like this to help you out. Traditionally, you need multiple tools to do so instead. Now, there comes another issue with managing projects the old-fashioned way, which is by using pen and paper, okay? And that is, it's very difficult for us to see what tasks actually depend on a particular task and what tasks don't. So let me show you what I'm talking about here in what you're seeing, okay? So notice that I have this entire column here, and this particular column, see if I can zoom in again, it is called predecessors, okay? So in terms of predecessors, it's very difficult for you to see this until I scoot this over. And now you start seeing these bars here. And let me see if I'm going to zoom out on the bar so that we can see it just a little bit better. Trying to make it so that we can see and understand. There you go. Okay. So there's not a lot to activities on this kind of very generic thing. But it allows you to see what actually is dependent on other things, okay, based on a time element. So in the way that this is actually showing up here, okay, you actually do realize something, that this particular task here cannot begin until the other one finishes, okay? And the same thing we have throughout this project. So take a look at this long blue bar here.
So Ronnie, just to hearken what you were talking about earlier, that example of the paint drying, so would this kind of relate as far as our predecessors here?
It can. It actually does show you that something like that can affect your schedule, and there's reasons why. Now, let's talk about how do we actually break that down and how do we actually change things like that. So here I'm going to switch utilities here just for a moment to help us out. So that we can see how it normally is displayed in a project management information system. I think I said integration system earlier on, but it's actually information system. So when you tend to see those bars, here's what I'm representing right here, are those bars. Each one of those bars and the length of them represents a duration to a task, okay? So when you have multiple tasks inside of your project, you're going to link them all together so that it forms one big project. So there are really 4 different styles here as we start to take a look to show us. So here it is. When you start to see this, the first one right here is actually what we call finish to start. Now, in the finish to start type of predecessor or dependency here, okay, let me show you what goes on this one, okay? So what we normally do is that we link these tasks together. So there's a couple of things that have to happen in a finish to start. And make that a little bit bigger so that we can see it. Make it a solid line. There we go. Okay. So what is this really saying here? Okay. Well, because of the way that the language is, okay, you and I would say things, I think, okay, at least here in the United States, this is how we would say it, okay. Task A here, or B, or whatever it is, okay, the first task has to finish, okay, completely before the second task can begin. Okay, so that sounds normal. Okay, now in project management, it's never like that. There's never such a thing as, this is the way that normal people speak, right? So the way that this actually says it, notice it says finish to start. It really says this: before task B here, this blue bar, can begin its task, task A must finish. Still saying the same thing that I'd said a little bit earlier, but that's the proper terms, and what they're talking about here is a predecessor. So
Okay.
what is this relationship to a predecessor? And that's how these bars are normally done when you start to see this, okay? So when you actually have something like that, you're like, oh, okay, you know, that actually makes sense that this has to completely finish, just like we were talking about paint drying,
Yes.
before the second coat can go on.
So this might be a little bit of a silly question, but would you go ahead and define that second activity as a successor, or is that a term they use?
Yeah, they do use the term successor as well, so you do have that, or you call it a dependency as well, that it is dependent upon the first task finishing. So it really does depend on what project management terms you come from in your background that you're going to find that. In Microsoft projects, they're called dependencies, and predecessors is what they tend to be
So
called.
we're looking here at this diagram. We have different types of predecessors and dependencies. Is that what I'm understanding here?
That's exactly right, and yes, you do need to know about them. So good thing we're
Great.
going over them. So we'll go over them. Okay. Notice this second one over here on the right-hand side, and I will again make the link for us, and let's see what we can do here. Okay. Now Cherokee, this one looks a little bit strange because we're probably saying, what in the world is this one about? Okay. Now this one is a little bit strange in the very fact that it says that before task B, the second task, can begin, task A has to begin. Okay. So in other words, the way that I would normally say it is task A and B can begin on or about the same time.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. See, to me, my language is much more clear than the way that the predecessory
Start to
types.
start.
Yeah. Start to start. Right. Task A and B can start on or about the same time. It doesn't mean that it has to. Okay. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky. It essentially says that as long as task A has begun, then I can begin. But I
So
can't
really,
begin
even if
before that.
task A has been completed, as long as task B starts afterwards, we're still in the clear?
Yes, as far as a start-to-start relationship. Now, if actually task A has to be complete before task B starts, then you're at a finish to start.
Okay.
So in other words, if task A has to be complete, totally done, before task B can start, you're at a finish
Different term.
to start.
Got
Yep.
it.
If task A begins, then sometime in the next day, sometime in the next few weeks, whatever you might want to call it, as long as it's actually started its process, then you can start as well, okay? So, and you hate to say that, the relationship that I have here is I always think about cooking, okay? Because why I love food, that's why, okay? So, like my daughter, she just told me that she wants to go to culinary school, which is great, okay?
Nice.
But she can only make one thing at a time, okay? So like if she makes something for dinner, she finishes this, and then she makes that, okay? See, for me, I will actually go ahead and start making something and then put another thing on, okay? So I go, all right, what takes the longest? And so what I do, I start cooking whatever takes the longest. And as soon as that started, what do? I go ahead and I start my second item on the stove, you know, much to the chagrin of my wife and the mess that I make. But overall, though, that's what I think about
and
here.
I don't even really think about it, but I do the same thing, Ronnie. I guess I always thought it was a little bit of OCD, but technically it would be a form of project management so that everything can finish at the same time. Your food is warm and ready to serve.
There you go. Yeah, see, great. Yeah, that's another way to think about it. But that's, like I said, that's probably because I'm hungry more than anything else that I always think about food in that way. So, but that's the other. All right, let's take a look at our third one here, okay? Now, the third one is finish to finish. Now, Cherokee, you've already gotten the head start. I already told you what these other two mean. You want to take a guess at what this one would actually mean here?
I'm going to assume that the dependency, the second one there, is not completed until at least A, or the first one, is successfully completed.
That is absolutely right. Yeah, it's kind of a weird one, but you know, even if the second task were to finish, okay, even if you go, I'm done with mine, according to the way that project works, you're not really done yet. I know it's so strange, right? You're not done until what? Until that other one is finished. So let's use our food knowledge because that actually worked here, right? So I can say that dinner is ready to go, okay? But if I only have one of all the plates that I want to serve, I really don't have dinner ready to go, okay? I need all of them to be done before it's actually ready to go. And so the same thing with the finish to finish. Very good, yeah. So here it is. All of them have to be finished. So in other words, task B is not finished until task A is also finished. The way that I like to say is the other way instead, which is task A and B, they need to be finished on or about the same time instead. And that's really kind of the key here, okay? But really the true predecessory relationship is the way that Cherokee described it, is that task B is not finished until task A is also finished as well. So it just depends on that time element. Now, by far the hardest one to understand, and there's no really good examples of this one, because I have looked all over the planet, and I can't even think of a time in which I can even use one here, okay? Now, in this one, it sounds the most logical, right? Start to finish, okay? That to me is the most logical idea, right? You start something and you finish it, okay? But notice the way that this turns out here is that task A, because it's pointing to the start side of it, right? Task A here, okay, it really, let me make sure I say this right, okay? See, I can't even get it right here, okay? So task A has to go ahead and, no, see, I did it backward. That's why my arrows are killing me, because this is the exact same arrow that I drew. So it's backward. So let me redraw that. That is why I messed up. I was like, why is that about to say the same thing as finish to start? So let me redraw that one, because I was about to make a big mistake.
Yeah, I was just looking in the chat here. We have Mr. David said, imagine having Gordon Ramsay as a boss for project management.
Yeah, that would be.
He's a little tough. Yeah, definitely.
All right, so now let me kind of recue this one for us here, because I really did mess. I was like, why does that look exactly like finish to start? That's not going to work. So here is the difference, okay? Notice this one, though. This one's a little bit strange, okay? So this one essentially says task B cannot finish until task A starts, okay? Task B cannot finish until task A starts.
It sounds pretty obvious there.
It does? Yeah, that sounds, I was going to say, all right, Cherokee, I'm going to put you on the spot then. No, yeah, this one is a very difficult one, okay? So much so that most people don't even really count this, but it is one of the ones that you can actually end up seeing as well. But there's no real good description of this particular one, and even examples of something like this are very hard to find, so much so that all the examples that I found just were so technically, mentally jumping through the hoops, I couldn't even tell you how to explain it in that sense. I can't even think about a time when that would actually happen, where I'd say, all right, I can't really finish until you begin, but you can see it sometimes, right? The very fact is, it might be programming of some sort that you might follow logic like this. Now look, my work can't begin, or can't really finish up. I can't really finish my job until you begin to work on yours. I don't see how that would affect me, but that's usually the idea, some type of programming language that goes on and looping and stuff, and that's where you tend to have these loops that have to kind of do all the stuff that it has to do. But so it is very possible, but it's not one of the very common ones that you'll end up seeing.
Okay.
So just realize that can be done there. Now, when you start to take a look at this, right, setting up dependencies are kind of neat, because all I have to do inside of Microsoft Project here is that I can select task number 4, and then I go to the predecessor tab here, and when I do that, this is where I can come in and choose, well, any of those options that are available to me. Say, here's exactly how I want it to go.
Nice.
Do I want it to be finish to start to start, finish, finish, start to finish?
Mean.
Yeah, and now you know what they mean at the same time. So you can actually set those things up. The key for you is at least understanding the very basics, but if you do need to set them up, and that's the way that you have to, is so you'll actually end up seeing that you can change those relationships to help you to manage your schedule a little bit better. So setting up predecessors or dependencies, even though CompTIA kind of separates those out in what we actually end up calling them, there's plenty of different project software that may do it a little bit differently, but just understand that that's probably more than anything, you'll need to make a decision or a choice in which of those you would choose if they tell you, here's what the requirement is, right? That, which one shows this, and you just got to know. So just kind of take what we've taught here just a little bit and be able to try and apply it into your realm of thinking and see if the analogy fits for you, and that's the way to go.
Well, Ronnie, thank you for showing us that software and explaining how we can actually integrate those terms, our dependencies, and our predecessors into the actual tools that we have available for us. There's a lot that we've covered in this episode, but I still think there's more to come. So for those of you at home, please stay tuned for an additional episode. I think this will go ahead and create a part 3 for our execute and develop our schedules, for our project schedules. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm Cherokee Boos.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
Signing off. Have a great one.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.